I remember loving it so much, and they loved it, and they got awesome results. And this fires me up in a way that never one day at my corporate job have I been fired up. This lit my soul on fire.
Welcome back to Meet Bridget, a show that gets into the nitty-gritty of the often untold teenage and young adult experiences of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers. This show is an extension of Bridget, a confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Kashia Rosenberg, and I co-host this show alongside my best friend and Bridget's CEO, Asha Gabriel. Today, we're bringing a super special and inspiring woman to the podcast, our beloved Whitney Barr. Whitney is the ultimate when it comes to examples of perseverance and resilience. A natural storyteller and motivator, Whitney is a personal trainer, mommy of 2 beautiful babes, wife to her soulmate Paul, and the face behind FitByWhit, a business she's built brick by brick in her proverbial yellow brick road.
As a personal trainer and online nutrition and fitness coach for prenatal and postpartum mamas, Whitney retired from corporate America at the ripe old age of 23 to pursue her dream of being an entrepreneur. She quickly became one of the top 200 elite coaches with the network marketing company Body, formerly called Beachbody. Many of you are familiar with it. And she has used her success and hard work to fund and start a family dog rescue. If you follow her on Instagram, you'll no doubt fall in love with her transparency, honesty, grit, and her natural ability to make you believe in yourself. I have the honor of calling Whitney one of my oldest and closest best friends. Whitney and I have been just sharing our world since, I actually think we were in like swim lessons as babies together and didn't even know we would one day like really be in each other's lives. We grew up in the same hometown in Redding, California. We instantly connected in high school when we both decided to just join our high school golf team. And I say join because that's what it was. There was no audition. You just show up and then you're on the women's golf team. They really wanted us there. And we just both had the same perspective on it. Like, I don't know, let's try it. Like, no, why don't we try it? And we had never really like been into golf before. And I think that sort of set the stage for our relationship. When I'm with Whitney, I feel emboldened to try anything with a smile on my face, to not take myself so seriously. She's one of those friends that every time I get to even spend 5 minutes on the phone with her, I feel just light and joyous and strong. So I'm so excited to share her with our audience because she's truly a special person. And I think what makes her so special is a combination of vulnerability and this just relentless drive and pursuit of big goals. I mean, there's so many things that Whitney's accomplished. I think that one very big thing she's done is that she's an Iron woman. So she's done the Ironman. And that is sort of like a peak of many, athletic endeavors she's pursued. But that takes a certain level of commitment and a little bit of crazy to actually pursue and do through an injury, that said too. So we're going to just get right into it. I'll dive right into our childhood years. So tell me a little bit, Whitney. I mean, obviously I know, but paint the picture for our audience about, your childhood, what it was like being little Whit, what you were into and what you were like.
Thank you guys. That's awesome. Childhood. Oh my goodness. I was that I would say that awkward little girl. I look back on photos and you look back on your yearbook pictures and you're like, oh, I look back at her and I'm like, oh, she just wasn't sure. She wasn't too sure of who she was yet. But I would say I was that girl that I tried everything. I think I was the person who was in a lot of different groups and a lot of different things. And that extended through to like high school, where Asha and I really got to be close. But, even early childhood, it was like I had the sports friends, and then you had like the performance and the dance friends, and then the musical and that side of friends. And my parents always really encouraged me to do everything, and they had me in everything. And we would drive from, gymnastics meets in the morning to then we go to basketball practice in the afternoon. So it was really just a fun childhood of my parent, oh man, throwing us into every activity we could be a part of. I look back and I ask them about it now. I'm like, how did you do it? Because now as a mom of 2, right? Like, how did we I can't fathom how you drove us to every little thing and put us in every little thing. And they said the other day, they're like, "We did it so you'd stay out of trouble." I was like, "Oh,
Smart parents.
okay. Now yeah, thank you." That was the parenting
I
technique, which
now
I love. I get it. I
I
totally get
remember
it.
about your childhood. When we first started hanging out, I came over to your house, and I think you just mentioned super casually, I think was it TV that you guys didn't have a TV, or you didn't have, like, cable TV or something, like, you didn't watch
No.
the shows, and I just remember, like, going over to the house, and I was like, "What?" Like, I just thought it was so crazy, but then looking back, I'm like, "No freaking wonder." Whitney is that person, we all have, like, one of these people that we know where it's like, even if they're trying a brand new sport they've never played, the first time they play it, they're going to be, like, one of the best at it. It's just a thing about her. I'm like, every little thing we did in PE, like, "Oh, we're gonna try, like, squash," and Whitney'd be like, "Let me try it once," and like, "Oh, I'm the best." Like, she was He's very coordinated and, like, fearless, but I look back and I'm like, honestly, I mean, she grew up in this I mean, you grew up in, like what area of town would you is that Old Shasta? When you guys are
They call it it's out in the boonies, like, literally
Yeah.
no internet, no TV. It was our days were filled with, "Hey, go ride your bike, get out of the house, go make a tree fort." We were gone from the morning until night like, until dinner, and I don't think they knew where we were, and it was just all throughout it was out in the country, and it was literally like you just played in the dirt and we watched Disney all we had was a VHS player, and we'd watch this one Pocahontas was, like, one of the popular Disney movies, and there was Grandmother Willow was this tree that we nicknamed in our neighborhood, and we'd go play at Grandmother Willow, right? And it was like, ride your bike, you make, bike jumps, with your older brothers. All of us girls on the block had older brothers, so we were just chasing and trying to be as much like our older brothers as we could and try and hang with them. Gosh, yeah, it was just like living like a simpler life. I look back on it and it was so simple. And you're right,
There's
no
a lot of
devices.
magic to that.
Oh my
There's
god,
so much
yeah.
because my favorite childhood memories are the ones that have nothing to do with, like, crazy outings or, like, toys or parties or anything like that. It's all just, like, playing in the dirt, capture the flag, rollerblading, bike riding, burying dead animals.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's
Of
honestly
course. Yeah.
it's just stuff that you get up to when you're bored as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, reading this article about, like, the importance of letting your kids be bored, and that
Be
that
bored.
creates that's where, like, creativity and imagination can really flourish is because, like, they have to entertain themselves, and that's really a form of problem solving that you're giving to your kids, and I'm like, I mean, it's hard. I'm like, I'm not gonna say, like, we bring our kids to dinner and about, like, halfway through where it's like, "Okay," we cave and we give them the iPad or the tablet or whatever it
Yeah.
is. I'm like, it does happen, but I was reminded about that, and I'm like, it's a lot harder in our present day to, like, do that with kids because it's everywhere, and it's like, okay, you're gonna tell
Mhm.
your kid that, like, "Oh, you're in high school and you can't have a cell phone," and literally everybody else has cell phones. Like, it's really hard to, like, try to raise your kids in a vacuum, but, there are different ways that we can kinda just, like, keep that in mind as we grow our families, and one thing I mean, we'll get to this, we're gonna stay in your childhood years a little more, but, like, the home, I had the pleasure of actually seeing Whitney in person. We hadn't seen each other since 2020, right after I had my first daughter, but I had the pleasure of seeing her in person again at her new, like, ranch house. It's her new house that they're redoing completely. It's this huge plot of land, and it was such a joy to see her kids, like, running barefoot in the dirt, playing around and just, like, that kind of pureness of space and
Mhm.
childhood and disconnectedness.
Mhm.
He's kinda brought back into her life.
I'm excited to go into that later because I'll
Yes.
share a story with you about how it ties back to childhood. It
Yeah,
truly does.
I
Yeah,
love that.
I love that.
What would you say, I mean, looking back at, like, your childhood and your, like, almost preteen years and stuff, what parts of that time are still very much present in the person you are today?
I think the biggest one, and my friends, who knew me back then remind me of this all the time. I always had, 1, this insane competitiveness, but 2, this the best word I can think of it is like an entrepreneurship desire, and that curiosity and salesmanship, I would say. Okay, so I'll give you an example, 2 examples. One, our little elementary school back then, had these fundraisers, and it was the fundraiser cookie dough sales. Well, one year it was Weebles. Anybody remember Weebles? They were like these puff balls, and they had feet, and you had to go sell Weebles. Like, what a weird fundraiser.
Very weird.
Pure
Like, it's like, let's make the kids sell nothing. Let's make them sell the
yeah,
thing that seems like it's of the least value. And like,
Wait,
who's gonna buy a
not even like
Weeble?
the dollar chocolates? I'm literally Googling this right now.
they were all
Please Google Weebles.
made of
Oh, it
Why
was a
would
puff ball. It was
puffs.
awful. I mean, but
Yeah.
we loved it. I was like, "Game on." Okay, so here was the thing. They gave us the prize sheet, and it said, "1st place gets the bite, 2nd place gets the boom box that you'd carry on your shoulder," and then I didn't care what 3rd place was because I was like, "Prize 1 or 2, this is on." I was in 5th grade, and so I was going against the entire school, right? There was K through 8. We had a K through 8 school. I think there was a total of about 300 kids in the whole shebang, so you knew everyone. It's just a small town out in the country kinda school. Grant Elementary is what it was called. So anyway, Weebles. And I went door to door every day in my neighborhood, other neighborhoods, calling all friends and family. And I was determined to sell as many Weebles as I could. And I positioned it like how they needed this Weeble in their life and created stories around the Weebles. And sure as heck, I won that dang bike. And maybe it was because nobody else could sell a Weeble, but I just was so determined to sell these Weebles. And I really just wanted the bike. So I think from childhood, I always had this one desire to like, well, competitiveness, but 2, I loved the door to door. I loved walking up and talking to each person and telling them why they needed this Weeble and somehow touching their life in some way or making them smile, or I don't know what I loved about it at that time because you're a little kid and you have no identifier to it, but gosh, yeah, so funny how that all tied together. And then later, 6th grade, Mr. Johnson was my 6th grade teacher, and he had this thing called Johnsonville, and you, as a student, had to create a business where you would make Johnsonville bucks, and you could trade them in for things. Bathroom breaks, I think you could get out of a test if you had enough Johnsonville bucks. I'm like, "Game on." Like, I'm gonna get as many Johnsonville bucks, and I'm gonna be the richest student in Johnsonville bucks in our entire class. So I decided to make desk dividers, but we called it, I teamed up with another friend, called it Cass-Witt Construction. And we made boxes around each student's desk, and we got the boxes from Costco. Like, you could get the boxes that they box all your groceries up in. I mean, for weeks, for months, my mom and I would drive to Costco. We'd ask for the extra boxes, or we'd just go in and grab them from under the counters. "Is it okay if we take your box?" "Oh, yeah, go ahead." Take them home. Okay, so then I would decorate them in, like, beautiful wrapping paper, whatever the theme the person wanted, they'd fill out, like, a little brochure with me, like, what style they wanted, what kind of accessories they wanted in their dividers. They could have cup holders, they could have things for their pencils and their erasers. So and I was just determined, and these boxes and these dividers got bigger and bigger and bigger, so pretty soon the entire classroom was just full of these big old dividers. Students were, like, completely just sectioned off from each other, and I remember Mr. Johnson had to take me aside after class one day. He's like, "Whit, we gotta have, like, a cap. We need, like, a height limit on the Johnsonville on
He's
Castwood
like just
Construction."
speaking to like a
Because
wall of cardboard.
he was he couldn't see any of his students by the Is anyone here? But
I
that,
wish
like,
that
kids
I
couldn't
had that.
I do too.
I eat snacks in class and like that would have been great for me.
Yes.
It
Special
was brilliant because you are
my head would still be sticking out
Yeah.
the top.
I know, yours would.
Like, raise your hand, and my, like, long little arm would be, like, sticking up, but no one else would be seen.
Yeah.
so
Well,
good.
I think that that's such a great story because, I mean, I remember actually because I think we did another fundraiser later for a softball team or something we were on, where we were selling chocolate bars. And I remember coming over to your house after school and we're like, "Well, we have to go sell our chocolate bars for a little while." I was like, "Okay." So we go like door to door, and Whitney's just like, "Hi, I'm Whitney Small." and, just charms the pants off of every single person that then they buy chocolate. Like true salespeople that I've ever met, like they could really sell anything. It's a combination of passion for understanding people and what they might need and matching things to them, but also just like this excitement and curiosity about like what could happen.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what is on the other side of that door. Like some people, like you put them in front of a door and they're like knock on it and like talk to people and it's like cold sweats and like I would literally rather do anything than this. And then other people it's like, yeah, I wonder what's gonna happen. Like maybe they'll buy this thing and then maybe we'll become friends forever. And like Whitney is that second category of person for sure. Like she just has
Yeah.
fearless. And then you combine that with like the competition and I think it just has this awesome.
It's a deadly combination.
Yes.
You and Kevin, my husband, are like I'm actually seeing so many idiosyncrasies because, like, I've never met 2 people more well suited to sales to, like, just anything. I'll buy anything from you.
So I think this is actually an accurate comparison because we'll get into it later. But I think that Kevin and Whitney are like golden retrievers of
Yes.
like, if you would make them any kind of dog, like, they're
Yes.
golden retrievers. Like, I think I'm kind of a little bit more of like a what would you say, Keith? Or actually, Whitney,
Uh,
either of you?
Oh,
Each.
maybe, like,
man.
something regal, but, like, a little
I
discerning,
know.
like a husky or something, like
Yeah.
Ooh, good one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Smart, but super graceful about it. I was thinking
Yeah.
almost like greyhound-esque, like they're
Ooh, yeah.
very like
Yeah.
ooh, and when they
Fast.
glide, they're gorgeous and they
Yes.
just
Yes.
glide across everything they do. Yeah, but they're quick as a quick wit.
But for Quiche, Quiche is tough because Quiche is, like, obviously, like, so
I'd be like one of those dogs from, like, Babe, remember the dog from Babe that had, like,
Yeah.
the little wheelchair thing? It was, like, so spunky.
yes. I actually couldn't think of anything less suited to you because you're, like, the person that is highly skilled in more
It was,
categories
like,
than
so
anyone I've
cute.
ever met. You'd be like,
I was thinking like a Boston, right? She's like super
yes.
agile, like quick, like short and like
Yeah.
really great body. And then she's
Nice.
like super quick but everybody loves her. Like everyone wants a Boston, right? They're
Ye
like, that's such a desirable breed.
yes.
Like a Shiba Inu, because like, you think that they're gonna be much
Yeah.
bigger dogs, and then you meet them in person, you're like, "You're quite small."
Yeah. But
Talks
for our
like
audience, it is like, these people are gone off the rails.
uh,
Like,
we're
the dog
gone.
comparison so, Whitney is also one of those people that has always been passionate about dogs. So I'd love to, like, have you talk a little bit about your first doggy and how, your
Oh,
friendships with
yes.
dogs have kind of shaped parts of your life and your passion for what you're building now.
Ooh, okay. I just remember this moment so well. I was 5. It was my basically 5th birthday present, and my dad told me to come down to our playroom, which was in the back like, way back, back end of the property,
Yes, I
and he
remember.
had a surprise for us. Yeah. And we walked in, and there was this little fur ball, puppy, white, brown. She was a mix of, like, husky with collie/sheltie,
Oh,
and she was just adorable, right? And I'm this 5-year-old girl who'd been asking my parents for a puppy probably since the day I was born, and it was instant love. We named her Bandit. She had this, like, mask that fur around her eyes that just made her
oh.
look like a cute little bandit. And I was hooked from that moment on, and I remember my dad saying, "I went to our local animal shelter and we picked her up, and she was in a litter of 5 or 7 dogs, and he was just looking for the one that was kind of the friendliest, but kinda chill, like, he didn't want the one that came right up to the cage, he wanted the one that was a little more chill, and he picked Bandit for us, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of this concept of a shelter or somewhere where you'd go to pick out dogs. I didn't know that that was right, I knew about it, like, pet stores, I think, by the age of 5. I'm
Mhm.
like, "What's this shelter thing?" And I remember him explaining it to me of these are dogs that, people either don't want or got lost or they didn't have, homes. And these were like you could adopt them. And I'm like, that is amazing. I just remember thinking how cool that was that we had adopted this dog and we were giving it this life that it may never have had a great, life otherwise.
No.
And, my mom quotes me all the time. She's like, from the minute, from your young age, 5, 6 years old, you told us one day you were gonna have 14 dogs." And I remember saying that to her. I'm like because my mom and I have always, like we're total opposites, right? She's the clean, like oh my gosh, she's a nurse, so everything has to be, like, sterile in the household. Bandit was never allowed inside, and then my mom would go to bed, and I'd open the slider and sneak Bandit into my room, and I'd cover her up with a blanket so my mom wouldn't see
Oh,
her. I mean, my mom and I are just so completely opposite, and so when she's like, "Oh, you're gonna have 14 dogs, Wit, huh?" And I'm like, "Yep, I am." She goes, "Well, we're never gonna visit." And I'm like, "Well, good. That's great." I guess, she and I just butted heads our whole life. I'm like, "Well, perfect. Even more reason that I need 14 dogs." Oh, and now my mom and I get along great, but man, that
aw,
was just a driving force that I definitely needed more dogs, and my dad's always been the dog lover of the 2 of them, so he and I shared that commonality so much. Bandit lived, yeah, 16 years. It's off in college, and my parents
wow.
she stayed home, obviously, when I went to college, and I remember that phone call, like, we think it's time." And so I drove home and we did it underneath this big oak tree in our backyard. And we had the vet come to the house and we just all laid with her as she took her final breath. And it was the most peaceful thing of all time. And that next month, I was just that lonely feeling. Like you just can't take a breath
Yeah.
when you lose something like that you've loved so much. You can't get that full breath. And so to make myself, some sort of coping mechanism. I went out to the local by that time I was living in San Luis Obispo where I went to college at Cal Poly. And I went out to that shelter and I just wanted to throw balls for the dogs. I was like, I'll walk them, I'll throw balls for them just as a therapy to help myself get over it. And that was right before the big, right as the big recession was starting to happen and people started turning in their dogs because they were
Oh,
either out
no.
of a house
Yeah.
or, they lost their job. And we had a ton of dogs coming into the shelter. And I remember one night as everything was closing up, the vans came in and there were so many dogs coming off of the vans that there wasn't enough room at the shelter. And so all the volunteers that were still there, they said, "Hey, would you be able to take a dog for the night just so we have an open kennel?" And here I was, this sophomore in college, right? I'm like, "Yep, I'll take one. Let's go."
Did you live
So,
in a dorm?
I am gonna by that point, I lived in a home, and
Okay,
we
I
weren't
was gonna
allowed
say.
yeah. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take a dog. Let's go." So I take one back to the house, and I'm like, "Hey, welcome, everyone. This is our foster dog." I lived with 5 gals at the time. They're like, we're not supposed to have dogs." I'm like, "It's just for the night. We just need to clear it out of the shelter. It's fine." And so I knew there was no way I was gonna take this dog back to the shelter, there was not space. So I got on
Yeah.
Craigslist and I made a post about her. And this was before real social media, like, we had Facebook pages, but it was only college students. So
Yeah.
I put it on Craigslist, and it was all about Kaya, we had called her. Within a couple days, I had all these people wanting to meet her. So I met with every applicant and I picked the best family. I still get Christmas cards from them with Kaya on the
Aw.
photo, renamed Suki. She lives on a ranch down near Los Olivos at this boarding
Oh,
school and she runs the entire ranch. It is the coolest thing of all time. And she grew up with their little twins who were little boys at the time, and now they're off in college, just amazing. So that was my first foster dog. And this week I'm about to pick up my 50th. So it's been
oh my
Yes.
quite the
god.
journey.
50th.
Yeah.
That's wild, Wit.
Pretty amazing, but that I just contributed all to one Bandit and starting my love for it, and then later my dog Kona, which, he was also just a rescue off the streets, and I call him the one that I was never able to find a home for. But I think it turned out that he kind of picked me, and he just
You
knew
were his
every home that
home.
I was yeah. Every home that I ever
Oh.
went to go drop him off at, like, he would bite the kids or bark at the people, and they're like, "You need
Oh.
to take him back." And I never had that experience with him. I'm like, "What do you mean? This dog's wonderful." Yeah.
Oh,
And to this
does
day,
he
I'm the only one that can do anything for him. He doesn't let anyone else do it, although he loves my 2 kids, and that's
Yeah, I
about
was
it.
just gonna say, does he
Oh.
love the kids?
And those are the only other
Ugh.
humans that he lets, like, pull his hair, its tail, and pull
Aw.
on his ears. He's now almost 16, and he's still pretty much going strong, blind, deaf, but this is his retirement home, and he found the ranch, and now we call our rescue or the rescue that we're starting here on the ranch is called Kona's Canine Rescue. So,
Oh, I love that.
full
Oh,
circle,
I
full
we
love
have a
circle.
cat that my parents gave to us, and I'm so allergic to him, but I just can't give him up because I'm like, no one is gonna want an 18-year-old cat. Like, no one. He's blind, he's deaf. He literally, you'll call his name, and sometimes he'll hear and he'll just like look up and look around and then like go back to sleep. And I'm like, no one is gonna want you. And so like
He's
you
basically
have
like
to live here.
"Yarr."
And I have so much love for him. I'm like, I eventually it's gonna be your time. I have no idea when that is because he's got like 19 lives.
Well, it's because I think it's something that I admire so much in both of you as 2 of my very best friends. Your hearts are so big and you are welcoming people. Like, you are the kind of person where it's like, "Do you wanna be my friend? Like, come on in, like, the water's warm." Like, you like to bring people in and make them feel instantly, like, welcome, and I think that it really lends itself to, like, building communities, which you both are doing. I love that. I love both of those stories of your doggies and all 50 of the ones that you will have, really saved and given it a second chance,
That's
but
so cool. So you mentioned that you were really very different from your mom, and your dad is more of the dog person. How and it sounds like you have older brothers?
an
I
older
do have
brother.
one older
One
brother.
older brother?
Yep, yep.
So what was the dynamic like? Like, I know you ended up going to school in San Luis Obispo, and that's not necessarily what led you to your career and all of your dreams. So, what was the dynamic like at home with your parents, with your brother? Like, how did you start to lay these bricks? And I love your analogy of yellow brick road and laying everything down brick by brick. So, can you kind of take us from the beginning of that road and like how you started to build that little foundation for yourself?
Ooh, definitely. So, dynamic at home, my dad and I are very similar. We're both that entrepreneur. He's been an entrepreneur his whole life and kind of a rebel, like was raised very much in that old-fashioned, like ritzy parents. They sent him off to boarding school and then he went to Yale, like he was going to be the next lawyer, down a long string of lawyers of his family. And he got done and he's like, I'm moving to California and becoming a photographer.
I bet
I'm
you his
just
parents loved that.
Oh, it was bad. He grew his hair out, major afro, hippie, like the whole thing, and lived in Hyam Palm, if you've ever heard of that, like the sticks, right? It's so yeah. So my dad and I have always been very, very similar, and so I would watch the way he chased his dreams and built a life on what he loved, not necessarily what his parents wanted for him. And so he always encouraged that, and both of my parents always encouraged us, like, whatever your dream is, go for it. So I feel super blessed in that way. And to this day, literally, they're here at my home right now, and they're helping us get the rescue ready. Like, they're helping us remodel the
Oh,
house. They're helping us. Like, there's nothing in this world I feel like my parents would not do for either my brother or I, and now their grandkids, which is so like, I don't think everybody has that. I know a
yeah.
lot of people don't have that, and it's something I feel like I never wanna take for granted. And then they were always and I touched on this a little earlier, they were just always those parents that wanted you in everything and encouraged you in whatever you wanted to do, but also pushed you to academically really succeed. And we're going to put you in the honors classes. We're going to get you into the AP classes. that's going to further you down the road so that you can get into a great college or at least have options for whatever college you want to
Mhm.
go to and pursue whatever dream that you want to do. They wanted me to have as many options as I could. And now my older brother, his name's Rob, he is 4 years older. He laid an incredible road for me to follow in, which was really neat. He was very much that excelled at sports, excelled at school, and so I actually always felt in his shadow in a way. I think Asha can relate to this too because she has an older sister that's very much the same, and we resonated a lot with that with each other of like, "Oh, yeah, we're just the sibling of Archana
Yeah.
or the sibling of Rob." And that was how our teachers knew us.
They were, like, good at school and sports, and they were also, like, cool.
Oh, popular.
Little tricky because it's like, even if you like, we followed and we checked all those box and we were good in sports, good in school, and cool, it's like, well, then it's not even, like, as great as it is the first time around, like, well, you're just
It's
kind
not your own thing.
so it's like
You're
you
like,
want something better, but it's like there's no other categories to be better in, like, okay. So, like, what do you but so then Whitney and I feel like kind of in the same stage of life, we're like, "Okay, we're gonna try to do all those things so we can at least, like, check the boxes that our older siblings laid for us, but we also have to, like, find a way to, like, do something kinda different. Do those things so our parents are happy and, they feel that we're gonna be safe and provided for or whatever, but that we also, like, wanna make our own way and do our put our own spin on things a little bit, and I think that that, like, really bonded us as we were going
I
through.
It
love that
did.
rebelliousness, the second child rebelliousness where
Yeah.
you, like, follow a path, but you're like, "I'm gonna do this in my own way."
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I mean, I think going through school, you and I also, like, we related on we were all in all, like, the honors and AP classes and stuff, but we would, like there are some kids that, like, are in those classes and they don't really make an effort and they still do well. I think Whitney and I were like, "Oh, we make an effort." Like, we were making our outlines and we had to study for long times, and, like, we didn't always understand everything, but we like together, we were like, we work together and get it done, and we ended up doing really, really well in pretty much any class that we especially the ones we worked on together. And, I mean, I kinda attribute, like, my competitiveness or at least my hardworking mentality when it came to school to, like, a lot of it to my mom who was, like had this immigrant
Yes.
personality and experience coming to the US and being like, education can get you into doors, opens up opportunities for
Yes.
you. Where would you attribute, like, your sense of, like, commitment and competitiveness to? Do you think it came from a parent or another or kinda your experience with your brother, or what would you think that what would you think
Ooh,
was
that it's super funny that you asked that because it started with my brother. I felt like I had to match the shadow that I was in and then find a way to somehow excel above it so that it wasn't just always Rob did this and Rob did this. I know my parents always bragged on Rob. And I'm like, how do I get bragged on as the little girl, as the little youngest sibling? I want to be bragged on. So it's definitely a competitive like, oh, well, he did that, then that's obviously what I do. He did those classes, he did those sports, obviously what I'm gonna do. So it started with that, but you know what's so funny that you asked that? Because as soon as it became high school, Asha, it became you and I, like, in a cool way of, "Oh, Asha got a 4 or a 5 on the AP test." Like, that's what I'm shooting for if you took the class before me, not that we
Mhm.
did those the same, but, like, I know Asha's up late night studying right now. I'm gonna be up late at night studying, and it's that competitiveness amongst friendship that I've had that my whole life, and I am blessed to surround myself with kick women who are excelling in things, and I love choosing those people to surround myself with because it makes me better. And Asha being one of them, yeah, it was a competitiveness of like, I can't let her do better than me, even though you guys, no matter how hard I studied, I will never be smarter than Asha. Like that's just I became to
True.
like know those things. But it pushed me and that it was such a gift because she and I were pretty inseparable all of high school. So
It's so
yeah.
funny. I love this point on, like, on competition because I think that among women, especially in communities of women, you hear the word competition and it's almost like a hush hush word. It's like, no, we
Mhm.
shouldn't be in competition with each other. And it's like, not that actually. I think like healthy competition looks very different. Like we were very much on the same team, but like
Yep.
kind of pushing each other a little bit like, oh, well, she's capable of that and we're
Yeah.
friends. I should be capable of that too. Like, what is she doing that's working? And like, I can implement that. And the lines of communication between us are clear. So it's like, I can ask her, like, wait, how did you do that? Oh, well, how did you do that one? Or like, what, when you wrote that paper, like, why did you get, an A on it? And the lines of communication were open between us. So it's like, it actually made it this like very healthful, productive competition. So I love kind of breaking that open because I feel like, it's not black or white. It's like women can compete with each other
Yeah.
in a way that makes us all rise.
For such a long time too, there was this idea that like everyone needed a nemesis, like you need somebody to be pitted against in order to do really, really well. And I think the very cool thing that's happening now and the very cool example that this story gives is like you said, Asha, it's not really competition as much as it is exposure. And so if you surround yourself with people who really inspire you, you can learn so much. And, as an oldest kid, I think it took me a really long time to lean on other people for help to like really learn how to use my resources. And in the nicest way possible, I really envy the friendship you two are describing because I think if everyone can look for just one person in those like awkward teen years, just to kind of like walk through different experiences with you, that would have made so many different situations so much easier from studying to just like getting through bullying and things like that. And so I love this example so much.
I mean, I just like all the memories are like flashing in front of my eyes right now.
Same here.
It's just like tough moments too. And I will tell you, it's funny, like when he was talking about like the competition in the school stuff. And it's like I have the same feeling with Kashia. I've shared this before with what we do at Bridget.
Yeah.
I feel like my strongest when I'm like, oh, but like Keisha's there with me. Like, oh, we're doing it together.
Yeah.
So it's like, I really got to show up because like we're kind of doing it together. And I always felt like, in our classes, even though we were receiving individual grades, I felt like Whitney and I were on a team. I
Yeah.
also felt like, I was like, clearly Whitney Small is gifted when it comes to athletics. She is gifted in a way my lanky little body will just never understand. However, I went out for basketball tryouts. I was the worst person on the team. Literally onto the basketball team my freshman year. The coach came up to me. He's like, listen, I was going to cut you from the audition. He's like, but like the audition is over and you're still trying to sit here and like practice your free throws and like trying to get one. He's like, you're awful. He's like, I'm going to tell you right now, like you wouldn't make the team. He's like, but you're just staying here. And he's like, and I can't not put you on. He's like, you're going to be on the team. So like, that was me, but
Go
I
coach.
just wanna hang out with Whitney. I'm
Seriously.
like, I wanna spend more time with her because I wanna be around her energy. I'm like, she's just, like, electric, and I love watching her play sports, and I'm like, I wanna try to understand that a little more. Even though I physically won't probably ever get there, maybe run my mile a little bit faster. She kept me on the track. Yeah, that kind of friendship where it's just, like, a little bit of accountability, a little bit of, like, pulling you out of your comfort zone a little bit. You have to like keep it healthy and that it's like, okay, I can't be everything my friend is going to be, but actually I can use that to like celebrate. I can use it to kind of like bend and grow and shape a little bit where I can, but just
Yeah.
so many memories. I mean, on the other hand, too, like Whitney and I literally had our first kisses on the same night in the same place.
Oh, my
Wait, was it
2
each other?
best friend guys.
Late bloomers. Was in high school.
Oh,
Where we
But like,
never had, and this was to our parents' point to keep us out of
yes,
trouble. They got us
yes.
involved in everything. Well, senior year, we were like, we like had crushes on these 2 boys and they were best friends.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden we were sneaking out of the house and hanging out with these 2 boys. It was like same first kiss, first date, all the same night. I mean, it was
Just a
hilarious. And
moment.
I
to
bet
2
you
best
these boys
friends.
were crushing on you the whole time too.
Who knows? We'll
Nope,
never know.
nope. I can
Well,
sure as heck tell you they were not. Because they were both these bad boys, right? And that was the
Uh,
appeal, is we were like, "Ooh, like, they're the bad boys," and, like, they didn't even know we existed. We didn't have any of the same classes with them ever in high school.
this sounds like the premise of like the next great freaking best friend movie.
it literally could be. It was like
Mary-Kate,
seriously.
Ashley Olsen, part
Like,
12.
yeah,
Never
like
there's
super bad, but
a
like Asha and Whitney. It's senior senior year.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we came home, it was like we had this, at this, little bonfire with them and stuff, and we, came home, snuck back at to, I think it was my house that night.
Yeah,
We
it
just
was.
smelled like bonfire, and we just had these big old smiles on our faces, and we're like, "It finally happened,"
Wait, did you guys
and
get caught?
No, not a kiss.
I was asking my mom about this recently, and
No.
she was just like, because I'm super open with my mom. I think I hit
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point where it's like, I think my big sister is like golden girl, and for the longest time, it's like everybody goes through moments in high school, even if you are the straight A athlete of the year, super cool and well adjusted and psychologically sound. Every kid has things that, when it comes to their parents, they don't know, okay, do I share this with my parents? Or is this normal? There's just there's always that phase of your teenage years where it's like you have start to build a little bit of distance with your parents.
Yeah. It's
And
that, like, building it's
it's
supernatural, just
healthy, it's
very
normal.
just it's that search for autonomy and self,
Yes.
like, that's
Yep.
exactly what you're supposed to be going through.
Yes.
To a certain extent, like, not that
Yeah.
you
Not
shouldn't
to be
talk to your
totally by
parents
yeah,
and
yeah,
lean
it's like
on them.
how do you build that while also being safe and knowing your parents are there for you,
Mhm.
especially in the things where it's like you could really use some of their guidance. Arch and I think felt like she just really had to keep her goldenness up for my parents well into college. And I think I just hit a point, I was probably in high school where I was like, all right, I am not going to be golden girl. I'm like, I'll get straight A's because anything less than that is unacceptable in my Indian household. However, I'm like, I'm not going to probably I'm like, I just can't, the standard is too much for me. So then I hit this point, I think it was as I was entering college where I was just like, I'm just gonna be so radically honest with my mom that she doesn't know what to do with it. We're just like, here it is,
Here's what I
and
did.
yeah, and it was so liberating. But so through that time, from that point forward, I've shared things with my mom and I'm like, oh yeah, we'd kind of sneak out and she's like, what? What were you doing? I was like, we'd go to parties and we not do anything really bad, but we'd hang out together and thought we were being bad and drink a little bit and then be pretty safe about it. And we weren't hooking up with boys. We were just we were together, and we
Yep.
were experiencing that awkwardness together and having fun. But I just have so many memories with you as a young person. And what I love about your social media and what you're building now, because we will segue into that, Whitney has really made a career out of coaching in fitness and nutrition. Part of her social media now is she's on stories a lot, and you really get to know, I think if you follow Whitney and you kind of follow along with her life, you feel oh my god, she's that best friend where she's so vulnerable and open, doesn't wear makeup when she's talking on her stories and just kind of shares all the goods, the bads and the uglies. And it really makes you feel so safe with her and as part of her community. And I feel so blessed to have had that from such an early point in my life in those pivotal teenage years.
The good, the bad, and the ugly is so true.
Speaking of the good, the bad, and the ugly, I want to dive into what you've built for yourself and this community that you've created because I've gotten to experience, the magic of Whitney, like on a friend's level, but also the magic of Whitney as a coach and trainer. And I just think what you do and the way that you do it is really incredible and infectious and so genuine. It's not like you go on and you see this Instagram personality that's Whitney, and then you log off and you're somebody else. Like, this is you. And I really admire how you've been able to build your path, build your career around the life that you want and not the other way around. So, can you tell our audience a little bit about how you transitioned from a traditional workspace into starting to develop and build your community and this lifestyle and, how that transitions into today? And maybe we start little. Let's start with the transition
Yeah, out of your
out of
wow,
traditional corporate
right?
job.
And that moment of finding
Mhm.
something new.
'Cause you did the
Yeah.
whole academic part.
Oh, I did, and that was what led me to the great college, what led me to the great, career and working up the corporate ladder. And you get near the top of the corporate ladder that young, and you're like, I feel like I've been fed a lie. Feel like, how is this the American dream? Like, I get 2 weeks of vacation a year. You mean I can't go? I remember asking my boss, Is it okay if I take my work to the coffee shop today? Like, I'd really like to work there today. I just feel more creative there and more. He's like, no, that's so weird. Like, this is bad. I mean, obviously before COVID. Now I feel like it's he would. I feel like I was before the times,
Yeah.
but that was unheard of, right? So when I was in that position, I was like, this seems odd. And here was the funniest part, you guys, is I felt bad leaving Kona, my dog, behind for the day. I was like, I am going to work at 8 a.m. I'm not going to be home till 5. He's going to be home by himself all day. And I had that pit in my stomach. I'm like, how am I going to, what? This is not the life that I want. So it started with my dog. How silly is that? But that's where my heart lies. So and then I started training for Ironman. And so I was working 60, 70-hour weeks. Ironman requires anywhere from 30 to 40 hours of training a week. But I had the privilege of training with a gal, and we would swim maybe 3 times a week, early morning, get to the pool at like 5. And I remember she was putting on her sweatpants after, our swims, and she'd be heading home. And she also had studied finance at Cal Poly. And I was putting on my corporate dress and headed to the office. And I'm like, one day I just asked, like, what do you do? Like, are you working finance in your sweatpants at home? Like, how does this work? She's like, "I left finance. I left corporate, and I had partnered." She's like, "I found this company called Beachbody." She was on Craigslist one day looking for something else, and I'm like, "Beachbody, what is that?" She said, "It's a fitness company." She's like, "Have you ever heard of P90X or Insanity? It's that company." And she's like, "You'd probably really like it because you like to talk to people and you like fitness." And, I'm like, "Well, I haven't really ever coached though." She's like, just watch this thing about it. And she sent me info about the company. Well, I watched the info. I'm like, sign me up. Like, if it let you get out of corporate, that's what I'm going to try and do. And from the minute my first task when I first joined as a coach, they used to call it with Beachbody, was to lead what they called a challenge group. So you help people with get through the programs. So either Insanity or P90X, you walk them through it from day one to the last day, and you just check in on them. Like, how are you doing? How did it feel? How did it go? And I remember my first challenge group, I did my dad's side of the family versus my mom's side of the family. I made them each pick a program, and we did Biggest Loser style. And it was like, who's going to lose the most weight? And I'm going to coach you through it. And I want you to tell me everything I do well and everything I'm terrible at so that I can get better. And I remember loving it so much. And they loved it. And they got awesome results. And I'm like, this fires me up in a way that never one day at my corporate job have I been fired up. This lit my soul on fire. I'm like, how do I do more of this? So it started with just a couple, like an hour. I would put in a little, like a half hour before I would go to my corporate job. I would check in with all my challengers. And then, like, half hour after my long bike ride in the evening, I would check in with them again. So it started as a very much a side hustle. And over time, I started to grow, like, I would dedicate 45 minutes. I would dedicate an hour to it, and, I'd run more groups at a time and start talking to more people, and then was like, "Maybe I could start sharing positive things on social media on this, like, Facebook thing that I didn't touch since I left college. Maybe I could share, like, a positive quote each day or, like, a something to help somebody with their fitness or with nutrition that I was starting to learn about." Then I thought, "I know what? I want credentials behind this. I want to make this a real thing." So as I was working in corporate, I started studying for my ACE personal training certification and getting some group fitness certifications. And I'm like, this is awesome. Well, then our corporate job, we got bought out by a big company, and they basically came to us and said, you can move with your job to a big city. When there was Texas or Connecticut were the options, or you'll get laid off. And I was like, well, here we go. I guess this was exactly why that this was meant to be. I'm taking the laid off choice, and I'm gonna go full in on this. So, at that
I'm just
point, I was,
picturing you saying, "Lay me off," with that big
"Lay
old
me off,
smile, Whitney.
baby." You know? I
Yep.
remember it so well.
For our listeners, Whitney's been smiling ear to ear this whole time, and it's so hard not to just smile with her. Please continue your story.
Lay me off. That was the best, like, letter I ever wrote to anybody ever. Like, I got a plan and I'm gonna make it work. And I was not making much money at the time. I can tell you that, but it was a humble piece of pie that I ate because at that time too, I went to our local country club and I said to the GM there, "Can I just shadow under your personal trainers here and just learn the trade?" He's like, "Absolutely," and got me right in, and I just started shadowing, and here I was, like, college degree, worked up the corporate ladder in finance, and I was sitting at the front desk of a fitness center wiping down the counters and the sweaty treadmills, and it was just like I said, so humbling, and I remember, my parents looking at me and going, "Why did we pay for that college education?" It's like, "I promise I will use it. I have a plan." And, my dad going, "Well, he sees himself in me, I think. He sees it so much." And he's like, "I just they're gonna support me no matter what." So I feel lucky in that sense, but they had their thoughts for a long time, I'm sure that they didn't share with me. And so sure enough, I just worked as a personal trainer as I grew my Beachbody business, and then I had my first baby, and as if you for those of you who know anything about kind of personal training or the hours, like, it gets really hard once you got a kiddo, and to find daycare to then try and go personal train, and you're paying for daycare is about the same amount that you'd be making as a personal trainer, and I'm like, so I let that go then and went all in full time with body coaching is what we call it now, or body partnering, and it just continued to grow it. It skyrocketed through COVID because so many people were working out from home and they had never explored that platform before and they knew that it didn't have the same accountability factor. It potentially couldn't, but that's where I got to shine a little bit more of like, I will help you. I will keep you accountable. I'll check in with you every day to make sure you're hitting your workouts. And so it COVID was a good thing for body and for coaches like me who were working from home and able to help people be home. And that opened up a whole new segment for me after I had my baby of what about the mom right after baby or the mom who's pregnant during COVID? Like we were afraid to leave the house and get
Yeah.
sick. And
Mhm.
we were afraid once we had our baby that our baby would get sick. Like there was just this terror and fear in the air, always like of sickness, right? So, and isolation naturally, even now,
Mhm.
post COVID, of you feel a little isolated after you have a baby and your
Yeah.
world's not really yours anymore. And so I really, having gone through that, I thought there's got to be other moms out there that feel this way. And how can I, one, become their friend during that time and be there for them through pregnancy and postpartum? Two, help them find their inner badass again through fitness and through moving their body. Three, help them become more pain free and just feel alive again and strong again. So that has become my true passion is helping women in that very delicate phase of life when you feel one, very empowered for what your body just did,
Mhm.
but two, you look at your body sometimes in the mirror and you don't recognize it. And then you become this mom living truly what feels like for someone else. And you forget a little bit who you are and who that awesome, maybe former athlete that you were ever that person or that you were ever that woman that chased that dream. Like, I forgot who she was. I believe that movement brings that back for women. I believe that a good sweat sesh, movement being medicine for them, that can change your entire life. And I think
Mhm.
if you change your mind, you change your entire life. And the trick to changing your mind, I think, is by moving your body. So it's been really a gift to help women through that season.
I really love that, and I love the message that you're pushing here because I think for a really long time for women in the postpartum period in general, like, there's so many conversations that are never had around
Yeah.
just being a woman, child rearing, like what that actually looks like, what getting pregnant looks like, what having a baby looks like, what loss looks like. But this part of it that you focus on with the postpartum mom is really cool because for such a long time, I think everyone thought women are so delicate when they're pregnant. Like it's such a fragile time. And it is, but it's also having now gone through it, it's also a time of incredible strength and focus. And it's really an opportunity to reintroduce yourself to your body and like what we're meant to do. And so for me, in so many ways, pregnancy itself was transformative. I mean, all aspects of it. But then the movement portion of it too, like when I was moving during pregnancy, when I was moving after pregnancy, it changed the game. It changed the game. So I'm, like, fully subscribed to this whole thing that you're doing.
Yes. Well, and
Yeah.
I love that we're sharing, like, how you got started in this because I feel like there's also a stigma around multi-level marketing companies where it's like, "Oh, like, it's all a scam or it's this or it's that."
Yeah.
And, like, everyone can have their own opinions, and obviously, we don't endorse any
Mm.
specific companies or getting involved in any, different programs, but I've been there with you from this decision to start this, and it's like you have hustled to create the status that you do have in your company and the freedom to be able to really like now find your niche, which is that of, motherhood and empowerment around motherhood. But I do like that we're sharing this because it's like within this platform that you've used to, take off and redirect your career, you have also personalized it and made it your own and used it for your own purposes. So I like to kind of highlight that about your story because we haven't featured someone who has been a part of a company like this and kinda giving it a human look.
You're so right. There is such a stigma behind it. And I think people hesitate in getting involved with one because either they've been burned or they've heard of someone being burned. Or when I first told my parents, I'm with Beachbody, my dad said, isn't that one of those pyramid schemes? Like, it's just this idea that, passed down from our parents. And I'm like, I don't even know what a pyramid is, Dad. I don't know what you're talking about. But I am glad that we get to talk about it because I think that if it's done well and it's done right and it's done with the human aspect of it's a person helping another person, it can be beautiful. And what I love the most, whether it's a mom doing a side hustle, with shampoo or makeup or fitness, I love that I get to support a mom putting food on the table for her kid versus me going out and buying the same product at Walmart or a lesser product. Now, supporting
Same.
Walmart, but that's just the entrepreneur side of me. Like, I want her to put, if she's hustling and she is going to like check in on me and see how I like my shampoo or how my workout was, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'll support that. I love that. So you're so right, Ash. I like that there's that human side behind it too.
Yeah.
You know, the thing you were talking about with, like, especially around COVID and, kind of focusing on motherhood because we both went through being pregnant during COVID and how scary it was. But also it's like you kind of found this match between working out at home and being a mom, which is really like in those early moments of pregnancy, like it's hard unless you have like substantial childcare, it's hard to get out of your home to work out. So it's like if you're gonna try to start getting back into your body and because I think that, like, the essence of it is that, like, once you get pregnant, something else is in your body, right? You have that baby, and then that like, you have to almost, like, step back into your body and be like, "I am the only presence inside this body again, so I have to, like, make myself at home again, right? So, if you're doing that as a new mom, it's, like, kind of the best way to do it is at home. So
Mhm.
kind of finding that match where it's like, "Okay, this is a at-home workout service. I'm going through this thing where I'm a new mom, like, this is a need in the marketplace. Like, if I'm feeling this way, I bet you someone else is too," and then using that to kind of, start.
And
You
then
got
doing
it.
it on camera because Whitney, I am such a fan of when you do push-ups over Brooke or, like, have William on your back, and I'm like, yeah, when you have kids, they literally are attached to your nipple, like,
Yeah.
80% of the time for the first 3
Yes.
months, but, like,
Yes.
movement is still important at that point, and
It
it's
is.
just it was really cool. You actually did this through your whole pregnancy with William too. Can I also just interject one thing? The first time I really met you and spent time with you was during Asha's bachelorette in Miami, and not very many people knew you were pregnant, and we took
Yep.
a yacht out into the middle of the ocean, and there's an
Forgot
island,
about this.
not a close island, just like a small little island, maybe like 100 yards away, like a football field. Whitney proceeds to go to the upper deck of this ship, and she's like, "I'm gonna jump off, and then I'm gonna swim to the island." And she was pregnant, and she did it, and I
I
remember being
forgot
like,
that.
I love the water, but I remember being like, "Wow, that's brave." And I did it too, but I also remember being like, "There's no way I would have done it if I hadn't have seen you do it first."
Case
So
in
that's
point.
one.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And
I
he's such
forgot
the
about
best.
that.
He
Yeah,
enables you by the thing that it's like, oh, like the big good challenge.
Yeah.
That's like yes. So none of us had ever like the rest of my bachelorettes hadn't experienced pregnancy yet.
yeah,
And Whitney's like, I remember she told me she was pregnant. And like in my mind, I was like, we already had it was right before the bachelorette was coming up. And I was like, oh, she's not gonna come. I'm like, oh, that's heartbreaking.
yeah.
But like amazing, she's pregnant. And she goes, but I'm still coming. And I'm like, okay, cool. So she shows up and it's early. It's like her first trimester. Girlfriend, like we're like going through the airport. We took like a red eye to Miami. She's like, oh, 1 second, runs to the bathroom, pukes, comes good. It just resumes bachelorette activities, which like we didn't have any context for this. I was super, super sick both of my pregnancies in the first trimester, like could hardly leave a couch. And I'm like, Whitney threw up like at least 20 times on that trip. And she would every time puke and rally, puke and rally. And she wasn't talking to everyone about it. She wasn't complaining. She was just so game. And I'm like, this is just Whitney to a T. She's one of those people that even through really hard things, it's not that you don't you feel hard things and
Yeah,
I talked to about some of these things because you do go through, you are human. You go through difficult things. It's the resilience. And at some point, once you processed it, you have a way of looking back at things or kind of just finding the silly or the funny or the like, screw it kind of mentality about some things that just you like talking about something harder. You got a smile on your face. And you kind of just like, you make it human and approachable and real. And I mean, Keish was just talking about you like doing these videos with like, volume on your
yeah,
back, or even like I loved one of my favorite things you did was when you were sharing your early postpartum journey. And it's like you did it with a sports bra on and the pants were low. And it's like you can see like the fresh postpartum belly. And I'm like, thank you, snaps, because it's like that's how it looks. And like it's supposed to look that way because, like, it carried something for 10 months and then it's gone. And, and this woman is still, like, working hard, and now you look at you now, you have freaking rock hard abs, they look amazing, and it's like, yes, you can, but it's like, but it did start this way, and you didn't hide the fact that, like, this is my
yeah,
starting point, and I'm still getting after it, and I'm showing you what it looks like for a fresh postpartum belly to be doing planks. I just
Yeah.
went on a total tirade there, but, like, that's Whitney, you know?
That was
You
important. That
you
was yeah.
and it
I wanna talk about some of these moments that have really
yes,
granted you this resilience,
yes.
because you are somebody that finds a way to smile and laugh through things and find the humor in everything, but I also feel like you're the type of person who is you're building your stairway as you're climbing it, and I really appreciate the example you set for your community, for your kids. Can you share with our audience, some of the challenges that you faced in the last several years? I know there's been a couple, and you can start wherever you want, share as much as you want.
Let's see, I think the very first one so one of my foster dogs, I took it to it was day before my birthday, and I was meeting up with another one of my bridesmaids, and I said, "Let's go to coffee," and I brought my new foster dog with me and tied it up to a table at a coffee shop, and we walked inside, and the next thing we hear is this crash, and I turned around, and this man's on the ground next to the foster dog, and when I come out, he's, "Your dog tripped me. Your dog tripped me." "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And sat with them. He's like, call the ambulance, call the ambulance." Like, "Okay, okay, okay." call the ambulance, and they come and they get him set up and he's like, I want to go to the hospital. I want to go to the hospital. And, at this point now he's cursing me out, the dog out, all the things. A little bit like, I wanna say just grungy looking is the right word maybe, not well put together and just he's just mad, and about 2.5 years later, we get, a knock on our door, and somebody hands me a piece of paper. He said, "Are you Whitney Small?" At the time. "Yes." "Here, you've been served." And I remember opening up the piece of paper, the folder, and I just collapsed and I fell to my knees and we were being sued for $11.5 million. And that moment was like, I didn't even know what for. I didn't know the name on the paper. I was like, what is this? And I read through it, and it was the name of this man who I never caught the name even after that day, that day. I remember going to the local hospitals asking, like, "Did a man come in on an ambulance from a dog tripping him on the leash?" They're like, "We don't have anything like that." And I wanted to see him in the hospital, check in on him, see if he was okay, and never
Oh
found him.
my
So I
god,
didn't know
only
his
you,
name.
Wit.
I did not know his name or anything, and so this was the first that I'd read his name on a piece of paper, and then I read $11.5 million, and I'm like, "There goes
Oh my
everything."
god.
Because up until this point, body was the thing that was helping me save for my dog rescue, and I'm like, "There goes everything. There goes everything I've ever saved." And so, we hired a lawyer and poof, it was a battle for about a year and a half. It all happened kind of during COVID and before our first kiddo. And we settled and it took a lot of what we had saved when we settled. And just feeling like you were starting over and there were so many talks in there of just like, just declare bankruptcy and just start fresh again. And when you hit that rock bottom, you're just like, "Phew, all right, you know? And my dad said it one time, he's like, no good deed goes unpunished. And I'm like, it felt so true in that moment of like, here I was taking this foster dog
God.
out to like go get a cup of coffee with a friend and expose the dog to new people and people passing by. And of course, the next thing you know, you're getting sued. It was a shotgun, lawsuit. He tried to sue the coffee shop and me and the city and the city that owned the dog rescue or the shelter, all the things, right? So
Ill-spirited. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and, he ended up with a lot of money, and it's so, so sad, but so that was kinda number 1, that was, like, that first big gut punch when you,
Mhm.
I think, are like, "Okay, welcome to adulthood, here we go." We recovered from that, and it just was like, "Alright, it's such a learning experience, and we're gonna rally and just keep saving and keep dreaming and keep going." I think my next big challenge in life was the loss of my 2nd child. I know I'm in good company here of just knowing like miscarriage can really rock
Mhm.
you as a woman. And I did not know how common it was and that you could lose a baby because I had my first little guy and never had anyone talked to anything about the potential of ever losing a kid. So I had no clue about miscarriage. And when we went in to get our ultrasound at 10 weeks and that there was no heartbeat, that was a huge life shift for me, I think. I just remember, ugh, the, like, days and weeks of tears, and then discovering through that journey how many women deal with it silently.
Mhm.
And I thought, there has to be a better way than that. And so I started sharing the loss and the
Mm.
journey after the loss and what we did to help cope and get through that phase. And I found my closest friendships. And if you can say, like, your bond with your community and your followers, and you find your people through the hardest times and being vulnerable enough to share them because there's such a rawness in that, and that's how we connect as humans. is sharing the deep stuff because we all have our stuff. And when somebody is willing to share it and go, here's how I got through it, here's how I'm getting through it, here's the roadmap that I'm using, maybe that can help the next woman who
Yeah.
maybe has never gone through it, but all of a sudden she finds herself now in it and she can use some piece of what I've been through to maybe help her. And the amount of messages that I got after starting to open up and share of women who just said, "Thank you for sharing," because it gave me the bravery to share mine with my family. Not necessarily that they shared on social media, but it gave me the bravery to share with my family or my friends and to tell my story. And that was like, "Oh gosh, there are so many women that bottle that one up." And I think that there's so much power and absolutely you can grieve in any way. There's no right or wrong
Mhm.
way to grieve and to go through that process, but to know that I wasn't alone, that was a really big one.
I think you said something really beautiful earlier, and we weren't recording at the time, so I wanna bring it up to our audience because it's something I really firmly believe in. You were talking about how after that loss, when you got pregnant with your 3rd baby, beautiful little Brooke, you had, like, this shift in mentality where and I've heard this too, I think the very American thing to do is not to share your pregnancy until a certain point. And for different people, it's a different time. For some people, it's like, 2nd trimester or like after we find out the gender, like whatever it is. But it's just like this arbitrary, like, we're not going to say anything until we get to this point. I don't want to jinx it. And I think that after you experience loss, one of the things you were saying earlier is that you realize from the second that you get pregnant with your next baby, you want to share it because it's not going to take anything away, from whatever happens. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that because you said it way more eloquently than I just did. And I also think that this is sort of like a theme in your life as it relates
Yeah.
to everything in your life, like all the other hardships you've experienced.
Yes, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. It was a mom who messaged me when I got pregnant with the 3rd, actually after the 2nd. It was after the loss of we call her Emma. It was after the loss of Emma. I remember messaging her, and she sent something super sweet back in response to, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I've lost a couple as well." And I just said, I'm so scared, for future pregnancies now to share, or I'll be scared in future pregnancies to share that I am pregnant and to celebrate it." And she said something that will stick with me forever. She said, "It doesn't hurt any less if you lose it, whether you share it or not." And I thought, oh my gosh, you're so right. Because the moment that I knew then that I had a new life inside of me, which turned out to be Brooke, I wanted to celebrate every second of that life once I knew it was there. And I want to scream it from the rooftops because that's just my personality. Some people aren't like that. They wanna keep it private, and that is amazing too, but I celebrate by telling everything and sharing with everybody so we can celebrate together, and I loved what she said, that it's not gonna hurt any less if you share at 6 weeks or if and then you lose her, because
Yeah.
if you shared, now you have a whole community to rally with and to help you through the grief and to help you through the pain if you are going to lose her. And that resonated with me so much. And so now and any future kids, we'll see, but I plan to celebrate the life from the minute that I know there is a life in there. I thought that
Yeah.
was pretty cool that she said that.
I love that. It really just harkens back to like how you live your life both publicly and personally because I look at you and you are very transparent about your losses and hardships, but you're also so like energetic about pouring yourself back into everything that you do in this very genuine and positive celebratory way. And I think it's just a really beautiful picture of resilience. It's not necessarily that like quiet, keep your head down kind of thing. It's like I'm gonna smile hugely and just take this all and like just spread it, spread the joy, spread the information, spread the teachings, and it becomes joyous being a part of your community and
Yeah.
getting to watch that.
Well,
Thank you.
I love that because I feel like even the doctors sometimes will say like, "Oh, like, well, I'd kinda just
Mhm.
not tell a lot of people until about 12 weeks, and then we'll know that your likelihood of it keep staying is a little better." And I think that they're like, "Well, if you lose it, then you won't have to, like, explain to a lot of people what happened."
So
And it's
awful.
like but then they also tell you, "But it's not your fault if you lose it." And it's like, wait, those 2 things, like, don't really go together. Like, well, then why would it would be my burden to explain what
Yeah.
happened if it's my fault? So it kinda just puts women in this really isolated, shameful,
Mhm.
like, confusing place, and it's just like, "Oh my gosh," motherhood alone, the experience of becoming a mother is naturally isolating because it's
Yeah.
just like, it is something like only you know, even with help or whatever, like, the you birthed that baby, you know, and you go through that, and that baby is you're their mom, like, it or whoever, you know, takes care of that baby becomes a mother, that is it can be very isolating, and it's just, like, to add that level of shame to it just, like, doesn't
Mhm.
make any sense. Or it would be like, it's easier to get over it when you get pregnant again, you know, if you just have the miscarriage, you can just get over it, and then you don't have to, like, be stuck in, like, explaining that miscarriage, and it's like, getting over it I think, you know, one of the things I love most about you, Whitney, is that it's like the hardships you've been through, you never really, like, have this narrative of, like, oh, just getting over it or putting it behind you, even though you're a very progressive person. You are like the Rolling Stone gathers no moss kind of person. However, I feel like you actually all these hardships and things you've been through, you find a way of integrating them into who you are, and it actually makes you stronger rather than being like, "Oh, I had this hard thing, but I'm just gonna, like, bottle it up and get rid of it and never think about it again." Like, you integrate it, and it makes you stronger, and actually you move faster and more, like, I don't know, just more efficiently through, you know, the next stages of your life. So I think you've processed your trials, including your miscarriage, with so much just vulnerability and such a genuine energy that it's been a gift, you know, to many, many women that have experienced miscarriage, but also those who haven't, but fear it, you
Yeah.
know, or have a friend that's going through it and are like, how do I be there for my friend who's gone through miscarriage, you know, and I don't know how to show up for them. And I like, okay, you know, having been a friend to many women who have gone through miscarriage, like, we have to be kinda like, you know, there are things that are helpful to say through to someone that's had a miscarriage, and there are things that are, like, not helpful, you know, and it's even if you have good intentions, you might not, you know how it's being received. So I think that just the more openness we can create about these trials and, difficult things we go through as women, the better. So,
Yeah.
you've done a beautiful with that.
Thank you. I know. I think the biggest thing was when that 10-week ultrasound, you do have a heartbeat. You leave with a big packet of info on how to become a parent and how amazing it's going to be and what a great pregnancy and how to have a great pregnancy. Here's all the resources. When I left the office with a miscarriage and no baby, there was no packet. There was
Mhm,
no pamphlet on how to go through the next steps. And that is what I think we could create as women of where's the packet? Where's the group of women in my community that have been through it? Where are the women who tell me put a strainer in the toilet to catch your baby? Like the littlest things that I did not know and I wouldn't have known if I didn't publicly share that I had just had a miscarriage. I would not have caught my baby, because I got that message from a woman who saw that I lost it and she messaged me. She said, "Here are the things you're gonna need." My doctor didn't give that to me. So those are the pieces. If you just knew all the little things to expect in the next week of maybe delivering the baby from at home to the next year of grieving and moving, to the next step and then maybe getting pregnant again. And that journey of, nervousness every time that you're going to go into an appointment. because you've lost before, that all of that's normal and how to walk through that. And I think as women, we can vocalize it and share it because it's gonna help the next woman,
Yeah,
tenfold.
absolutely. Ah, thank you for sharing that, Whitney, because
Like,
it is so true. There is no handbook. And I think that to be a person who really helps other people navigate a time like that is, just so true to your character in all ways. And it's,
It is. You're like Coach Wit, you
yeah,
know? It's
thank you.
really what's your like it sounds like you think of like, "Oh, a coach," but really, like, a coach is someone that's, like, there by your side and interested in your success, and when you stumble, when you lose speed, when you're running into, like, those sticky parts that are always right before a breakthrough, when it gets,
Yes.
like, the stickiest, when you
Oh,
start seeing, like, all those small things trying to pull you back, or, like, tear you down or get you to stop, it's like the breakthrough is right on the other side of that. A coach is someone that's there to remind you of that and to tell you stories of getting through it and what it looks like and reminding you that these things are all normal. Like all those
mhm,
feelings are normal in the sense that other people are experiencing them with you and by your
yeah,
side. That's really what a great, great coach does. And you were that in so many ways. And I love sharing you with the world because I think you're just this special light of a person